Let me tell you something that makes me want to chuck my laptop across the room. Writers refusing to take advice and feedback, getting angry with their readers for daring to provide criticism, critics who only exist to tear down other people, beta readers who refuse to give any meaningful advice or insight whatsoever, and especially people who try to hijack your story with their advice. Oh, it's so frustrating! Hello everyone, welcome to another Writer's Rant, brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And today I want to rant about how you should be receiving and using feedback. This one is important. Whether you are posting your work on the internet, sharing it with family and friends, giving it to beta readers, or submitting it for publishing, you will receive feedback. This is important to note because feedback is essential to your craft as a writer, and how you receive and use it are just as important. Here's the thing, it's rough to get critique. Even though plenty of writers say that they want insight and critique on their stories, they are not ready for what comes next. Simply saying something like that opens the floodgates to garbage reviews where angry and vindictive readers just want to tear you a new one. And many authors just want to be told how amazing their story is, and even just a little bit of well-deserved criticism quickly becomes grating to them. And as a result, many writers just throw up walls around themselves to block off any sort of feedback that does not fit their parameters of positivity. So yeah, that is a lot to unpack right there, and I'm going to right now share my experience just to help illustrate what I mean by all of this. You see, when I started writing and sharing my stories within the harem and with other people, I unfortunately acted this way. Like a lot. I was such a proud fool, thinking that my creative takes on whatever it was that I was writing were just so good that they were beyond reproach. I said that I was already following other authors and learning from them, so why did I need feedback from readers? I just wanted to be praised for how amazing my work was. I craved it. I wanted that validation. And I said, look, I already know where I'm deficient, and I can do that myself. So I ignored the warnings from fellow writers and even sometimes discounted insight from members within the harem. Those were dark days. But you know what? That quickly changed when I started getting negative reviews from randos on the internet for my Bleach fanfiction. Most of the negative reviews were because they hated that I shipped Rukia and Ichigo together, and others just said that I was being annoying with writing the story that I was. And at first it ate me up inside, and oh, how I just wanted validation for my ship and for my fanfic and for my amazing writing. But after a couple of grumpy weeks, I realized I actually needed this. I needed those terrible reviews. I needed to hear and to read these bad reviews because I needed to get used to them. Because there will always be someone who hates what you write, and they will make their opinions loudly known. And you need to know when it's just hate and vitriol that you're getting, and when you're actually getting real advice. You see, bad reviews are necessary not just to build up thick skin and resistance, but also to recognize the nuggets that are legit criticism. Because I began to realize that tucked away amongst all of these negative reviews, there was actually some really great insight. People pointing out that the dialogue wasn't right. People saying that the fight scenes were too clunky. That I was not describing enough where I needed it, and in some cases I was just pulling a Tolkien and describing way too much. And sometimes things were just happening because the plot demanded it and they said it was illogical. And wasn't I using a couple of words just way too often? And that got me thinking. The barriers started coming down, and I started then looking for helpful criticism. And that's when I was given a godsend in the form of a great review from our good friend Zaza over at Channel Zap. Check out her amazing work over there. I will link to her channel in the description. But you see, she walked me through how I could write my action scenes so much better. And yeah, it was humbling and even a little bit humiliating, but it was so necessary. And honestly, because of that one review, And honestly, it threw the doors wide open to making so many improvements, and not just in writing action scenes, but in sentence structure, in paragraph structure, word choice, dialogue. Just knowing how to better structure a scene helped to overall improve my writing, and I could only have gotten that if I had opened up myself to receiving criticism and actually utilizing it. And even more recently, I shared a very ambitious book with some beta readers to get feedback. One gave me a long phone call to discuss everything that he had trouble understanding within the book, and another reader was giving me constant updates with emails for every chapter that he was reading. And while that can sometimes get a little bit overwhelming, they provided wonderful insight and suggestions that are essential to making this book better. Those are just 3 of my more notable adventures in receiving feedback and using it. But what about you? Let's talk about your work. And what about what we see happening with other authors? Let's first take a look at the murky waters of fan feedback to already established IPs, meaning already established stories and series out there. Looking at what happens on a larger industrial scale can help us better understand our much smaller situations as novice writers. So I'm not even going to touch something like Star Wars, because that is a fiery mess that honestly lies at the feet of Lucasfilm, Disney, J.J. Abrams, and Rian Johnson, and of course, many terrible fans who just need to learn to let it go. I mean, I'm upset over it for many different reasons, but the horse has been beaten to glue, and the glue has been beaten to a dry crust, and now it's just disgusting and awful. So let me tackle something that I'm familiar with that isn't quite such a garbage fire, and that is the ongoing series RWBY. Fans of the show have a lot to say about the writing and how it has evolved as the series itself has grown. And one of the worst debates is whether or not the show is still the same as the late Monty Oum, the original creator of the show, had intended, what he wanted. And really, this debate is ultimately a moot point, because we are so far into the story now, and many things have changed for both good and ill. But here it is. This is really where we should be paying attention. It's that the fans constantly give feedback on each volume of the show as it comes out. And RWBY, really early on, established itself as a story that interacts with its audience. At least it did in the earlier seasons. This is where the problem and the disconnect come. The fans give the show writers feedback, and the writers for the show don't want it. And this right here is a clash of visions. The fans expect the show to go one direction, and the writers already know what they are going to do. So you have this conflict of interest right here. At least that's the way that it looks. What the writers should do is engage in useful criticism. For example, when the fans say that a character seems to be underutilized or less developed than their peers, or when the fans say that we need information for things that you've been teasing for way too long, or maybe the action felt a little janky in that last action sequence, you could try to polish it up. Show, don't tell. Stuff like that. That is very important. Here's the trick though, you don't want others hijacking your story. It happens all the time, and fans definitely will try to do that to a large show like RWBY. And even your editors or your beta readers for your book might try to undermine your vision by inserting their own stories and expectations into your own book. This is where you must have a dialogue with the people who are giving feedback. You have to be able to explain your vision and your reasoning for why you are doing what you are doing within your story. This way, good reviews can say, yes, this works, but also blah, 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 blah. Like, you should think about these things. Or your reviews can then be, no, what you're doing isn't working. I'm sorry, but you can improve it by doing blah, 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 blah. This kind of dialogue might be difficult for showrunners, film directors, and even authors of ongoing series because there is the potential for revealing massive spoilers, and we don't want to ruin the adventure before we even start or derail it right in the middle or give away the ending. That just sucks. But creators should still have this dialogue and be delicate with what they choose to reveal. The creators of RWBY have yet to strike this delicate balance of revealing their vision while accepting feedback. And yes, it requires a certain amount of humility and requires a certain amount of trust. So when it comes to your own stories, you want to be open with your writing group and with your readers about what you are going to do with your book. That doesn't mean that you have to give away everything, all the twists and the ending, but you need to be clear about the vision that you have. I talked about large productions first because you are not bound by those same rules. You don't have fans ravenously attacking your first draft. Your first concern then should be making the best story you possibly can. Have conversations with your reviewers and talk over any and all critique they give you. This will prevent the majority of misunderstandings that can lead to hurt feelings and the rejection of good advice. And to further help you along with getting the feedback that you'll need, I want you to consider these suggestions right here. First of all, specifically ask readers to look for stuff like spelling and grammatical errors, or maybe look at plot or character inconsistencies, or just weaknesses in the story overall. Have them look at something specific, not just throw it all at me. This way they can then very clearly and concisely construct their criticism. But if they see more in the story that they feel needs to be corrected, then you just have to open yourself to that criticism in whatever they hurl your way. And what should you do after you have received their criticism? Be gracious and generous. Don't look a gifted horse in the mouth. Hey, they took the time to read your story and provide feedback. Do you realize how amazing of an accomplishment that is? And now your story can get better from here. Of course, there still remains the process of sifting through all the feedback to find what is good and what might not work for you. You need to keep your vision in mind and honestly ask yourself if and how the feedback will improve your story. Not everything that you get will be something that you can reasonably use. Reread or revisit the conversations and notes that you've had with your reviewers as often as you need. Take your time and mull it over. Then select what you see will indeed improve your story and work to incorporate that advice to the best of your ability. Keep sharing your progress with your readers and reviewers and see how they react to the changes. You'll find that you improve much faster this way. And I'm going to speak to you as a reviewer. If you're just watching this and you're just all like, well, I haven't yet heard any criticism towards me. Well, here it is for you. If you are a reviewer, be helpful. Don't just heap on praise or negativity. That doesn't help squat. Offer actual advice and suggestions. Give more than just a sentence or two of feedback. Share your experience with the story. Mix in both the good and the bad because sugarcoating doesn't help anyone. So just be honest. And yes, it is very, very possible to be honest without being a jerk. There, I said it. Okay, now, I could go on and on about this kind of stuff, and yeah, I'm sounding a little bit jerkish myself getting this way, but you know what? This is an honest conversation that needs to be had because too many reviewers hijack people's stories and too many writers refuse to really receive criticism and feedback. Dialogue is essential in receiving criticism. Keep your vision for the story in mind, but be honest and willing to change as needed. Be thoughtful in your responses. That is how you do feedback right. And if you would like more writing advice, please feel free to check out our other videos and especially our podcast episodes found over at Podbean, iTunes, and Google Play. We also have writing exercises for all you novice writers out there at our Pinterest page, and you can engage in direct discussions with us, the entire harem, over at our subreddit. We hope to see you all there, and thank you for joining us on this adventure that we call writing. And until the next video, y'all, tschüss.